Hello, my name is Casey Haynes, and for my final project in ethics and computer science and IT, I'm going to be looking at the SolarWinds hack of late 2020. We're going to look at some organizational issues that may have existed within the company and some paths of recourse. So the information technology firm SolarWinds was hacked by sophisticated adversaries in 2020. It went undetected for months, and it allowed the attackers to spy on US government and US cybersecurity firms that SolarWinds was employed by, had contracts with. And in a news interview after the hack had been discovered, the former CEO of the company blamed the vulnerability on the fact that an intern had set a weak password on a host. The big takeaway here is that the attack was really preventable. And an intern setting a weak password, A, them blaming the intern for setting the weak password, and B, the intern being allowed to set the weak password, may point to larger organizational problems at SolarWinds. Significance of this is not just SolarWinds, but pretty much all federal contractors need to have high security standards, and they need to adopt robust threat models. Many organizations don't have security threat models, and the ones that do probably need to think of more ways in which they could be attacked. The SolarWinds case really serves as a wake-up call. So is it ethical to trust an intern with setting a password? It really depends on the context and on the threat model. For critical infrastructure setup, no, it's not, at least not without due supervision. It's possible that SolarWinds may have not recognized the host that they let the intern work on as critical or even vulnerable. So that leads us into the question of what is an appropriate threat model for organizations like SolarWinds. Well, for this, we could turn to stakeholder theory. SolarWinds provides a critical service to the public. It provides services to the government, but ultimately it serves the US taxpayer. Therefore, a strong code of ethics should be enforced at the core of the organization, according to stakeholder theory, the US taxpayers being the stakeholders. So the code of ethics should include due diligence with setting strong passwords. The code of ethics should also include examining systemic vulnerabilities rather than pinning the blame on any one individual. There are certainly cases where there could be pure negligence or incompetence with a given employee, and those cases might be a little different. But more often than not, vulnerabilities in complex systems kind of arise from a multitude of factors. So argument one, passwords for critical infrastructure should be robust and shouldn't be set by employees with minimal training, like interns. Well, somebody could object to this, and they would say that, the experience level of an employee really shouldn't matter for something this simple. It can be done by anybody. And a response to that would be, well, as a federal contractor, just because anybody can set a password, it doesn't mean that all passwords are good passwords. SolarWinds is a prime target for sophisticated attacks. And in order to prevent trivial mistakes like setting a weak password on a vulnerable machine, passwords should instead be set with a context of threat. So higher ups should at least approve configurations if they're going to let interns make them. So what is a threat model? I've been talking a lot about that. Well, it's the process of identifying and prioritizing threats. Security policy defines threat models, and that policy should be enforced not only at a technical level and in the networks and in the computers, but also at the organizational level. And what about security policy? It's really unknown if SolarWinds had one prior to the attack or has one currently. There's a lot of investigation that still needs to be done in this event. But generally speaking, a lack of robust security policy or enforcement mechanisms for existing security policies is a really big problem in the industry. The SolarWinds intern being able to set a weak password scenario certainly points to evidence of a lack of a security policy or enforcement of an existing security policy at SolarWinds. So we have to ask, is it ethical to lack a security policy? This is kind of like the last one. Again, it depends on the threat model. For a federal or military contractor like SolarWinds, who has access to sensitive computer networks and sensitive information, it's not. Security policy should be implemented with the threat of sophisticated adversarial hacking in mind. And because of that, computer and human systems should be engineered to specification with an appropriate security policy. That's for them to figure out. But you have to really keep in mind who is attacking you, how witted they are, and you really have to think about where the vulnerabilities are in your very complex system, which is not a trivial thing to do. So argument 2, the security threat model employed by SolarWinds should have been extremely comprehensive, given that the company had access to government networks that provided access to a whole manner of agencies and office to foreign cyber adversaries. Someone, especially someone who actually works for the contractor, could easily object to this and say, they weren't tasked with tackling cybersecurity for all of the agencies that they served that were affected by the hack. And because of that, they bear no responsibility for the breaches of those agencies, and they don't necessarily need to cultivate robust security. And the response is, well, unfortunately, even an obscure vulnerability in a complex system can be used by witted adversaries to infiltrate said system. Knowing this, if any contractor wants to play ball with not only the government, but any part of industry where information is sensitive, information security is sensitive, they need to take security seriously because they have access to the whole manner of the organization they're serving. Unfortunately, there's really not much you can do with modularity there. So, if they want to play ball, they need to take security seriously. Concluding, these are my references, and thank you very much for your time.